Welcome back, people. This is Steve and Dave's 50 years ago this month. This is August 2020, so we're going to be talking about August 1970. We're going to be looking at the Billboard Hot 100 from August 15th. And Steve, why don't you start off? What's number one this month?
Well, number one, in mid-August of 1970, well, of course, it's Karen and Richard Carpenter's Close to You. This is just entering the Carpenters' kind of golden period. They are a brother and sister act, of course, that, chart after, and it's just unbelievable. They have a run in the early 70s that's just, extraordinary. This particular song, though, Close to You, is a Burt Bacharach and Hal David number. The Bacharach and David, again, one of the great songwriting duos in American history, they churned out a million hits for a variety of artists. And they actually wrote this particular song in the early 60s. And a number of people recorded it. Richard Chamberlain recorded it, who was an actor, had some chart success in the 60s. Dionne Warwick, of course, Dionne Warwick was the great interpreter of Bacharach and David songs. Recorded a version of this on B-side of one of her hits. Dusty Springfield. Dusty Springfield recorded it. But it wouldn't be a hit until Karen and Richard Carpenter recorded it in 1970. It comes from the album Close to You. And the Carpenters aren't really ever considered a kind of album act, but the Close to You LP is considered one of the great albums of this era. And actually, Close to You is it ranks in the Billboard, the Rolling Stone top 500 albums of all time. It ranks 175th, which is actually, I think, kind of mind blowing if you think about it. Karen and Richard Carpenter. Again, this brother and sister act from California. It's a kind of curious duo. Incredibly unhip, but also incredibly talented. And I think even people who didn't really dig their music could appreciate, among other things, Karen Carpenter's voice, which was extraordinary. She had
in fact, she was
three-octave range is incredible.
In the Rolling Stones top 100 singers of all time.
Yeah,
somewhere in the high 80s, I think.
Yeah. She's. I think her talent is undeniable. I think even during the era, this was not, the Carpenters were never cool. They were never cool, but they were, and everybody recognized her talent. She, of course, died quite young. She died in the early 80s at the age of 32, quite famously in anorexia. She had suffered a number of maladies. And so she only recorded for about 10 years at the most. It's one of the great tragedies, of course, is she died so young. We didn't see her, advance. As an interpreter, she would have been an incredible interpreter of song. I mean, I think it's possible to think of Karen Carpenter as almost a kind of Frank Sinatra figure, in that as she would age, she would be able to, because her register was low, she wouldn't have lost the range, right? That low register would have aged well. Well,
and I think you're absolutely right. She would have become one of the great divas of pop music, probably up there with Barbra Streisand, Celine Dion.
I think so too. I mean, again, and she was just a young woman. Okay, so the Close to You is, from my perspective, one of the. I mean, I don't think it's a particularly great song. Obviously, it's a hit, and it sold a lot of copies. But of the Carpenter songs, this isn't it for me. But what's interesting about the song is the use of studio musicians. The Carpenters made a lot of use of the Wrecking Crew, these great studio musicians in LA, and interesting.
That's many bands.
Absolutely. Hal Blaine is on the drums here. Karen was a drummer. And she really enjoyed playing the drums, and she was talented. But it was
it's fun to watch her drum.
Yeah.
When they were on variety shows and things like that, they would sometimes put her behind the drum set for.
Absolutely, that's right. It was kind of an oddity to see a woman, a young woman drumming, and it was also an oddity to have a young woman drumming to be the sort of the lead singer of the group. And so they oftentimes would bring her out front. Well, anyway, Blaine drummed on this recording. Blaine also talked about the Carpenters' parents, who were really notorious stage parents. And not to dig too deeply into this, but there was a lot of pressure in the Carpenter household. There was a lot of tension. I think it's fair to say that Karen was pulled in a lot of different directions emotionally, and how Blaine talks specifically about the Carpenter's mother, and quite a quintessential stage mom. And there was some painful moments here. A real quick shout out then to Richard Carpenter as well, who's the keyboardist, who's also the arranger, and did actually do some writing for the Carpenters as well. I mean, quite a talented man in himself. But when we think about the Carpenters, we really think about Karen Carpenter. One other thing I just want to mention this about real quick is they recorded on A&M Records, and this is the A&M is the A&M Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss, and this is a label that was started in the mid 1960s. Herb Alpert, of course, was a recording artist, Tijuana Brass, had a number of hits himself. But I think that of all the A&M artists, the Carpenters were probably the most popular, and in many ways, I think they really made the label. And so this was the most talented group in that A&M stable, and A&M made a lot of money off of the Carpenters. But there we go. So at number one,
and just talking about the appreciation for Karen Carpenter, that really, you're right. The Carpenters were never cool.
Never cool.
They were riding the wave of soft rock, which became a very popular genre in the early 70s.
Indeed.
Talk a little bit about Bread here in just a bit, another big soft rock group. But her contemporaries really appreciated her voice. She told the story about going out of a restaurant at one point when John Lennon was coming in, and he told her, "Oh, I heard your Ticket to Ride. I really like it."
Yeah, yes.
And Alice Cooper mentioned her on his show and said he thought she was one of the great voices of our time and things like that.
No question. I think, right. And so people in the industry, her peers, right, recognize the talent. Again, it's just, there's a lot of sadness that surrounds Karen Carpenter, but Close to You is number one in mid-August of 1970. We will. Yeah,
and in direct competition for the Saccharin Award.
There we go. Go ahead, Dave. Who's at number two this week?
Make It With You from Bread.
Oh boy, yeah.
This was Bread's first hit from their second album, On the Water. It was released in June 70, and it's one of those things, it's their only number one hit.
Now that's surprising. That's a little surprising.
It's the only one, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
They had 13 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 chart between 1970 and 1977. That's even more impressive when you consider that 11 of them were actually between 1970 and 1973. They were hot. And I think, unfortunately, maybe they had such a success with this ballad, David Gates song, that it just absolutely molded the future of that group, where they were going to go, what the record company was going to release.
I agree completely. Yeah.
Apart from David Gates, who wrote a lot of the Bread songs, they also had Rob Royer and Jimmy Griffin working together as a songwriting team. And the first couple albums, the selections from the albums were pretty much half and half, Gates and these two guys working together.
Yeah.
But after Make It With You, the only thing that got released, the only A-side singles were Gate composed numbers, and usually sung by David Gates as well. And
Wow.
listening to some of the other stuff, it just seems like it could have been much more diverse, and it might have given them a little bit more staying power. I think there was a lot of in that group, but it is what it is. So Make It With You, their first hit, their only #1. They had 7 consecutive gold albums in the 70s.
Now again, that's surprising. That's surprising. Because Bread was a singles act. A lot of singles, but LPs, no.
Well, you know, the LPs were driven. LP sales were driven by the singles, because
Sure. Yeah.
most of their LPs had several hit singles on them. So yeah, you go and get the LP and you have them all.
It's yeah, Bread gets pigeonholed pretty early as this whatever kind of saccharine soft rock, and really with these two, I mean, with the Carpenters and Bread, they really find sort of are put in the same sort of niche.
Absolutely.
And I think it's clear that the Carpenters, I mean, in terms of the legacy, and I don't think Bread has aged that well. I mean, maybe you see it differently, but
I do see it differently. I like
I'm not sure.
a lot of the material. I do wish that they had done more just off the main soft rock ballad thing. But they have one really good greatest hits album. And
yeah, and that makes sense. Absolutely would be a great, I mean, because, you know, of their singles, if you could get them all collected in one place, that would make a lot of sense.
Just one last interesting tidbit about this one. Only Gates and Mike Botts played on this song. Botts, drummer, and Gates played then the guitar, lead guitar, bass, and so on. And none of the other members actually played on this particular one. But
it's not a reach to think of Bread as almost like a. I mean, it's Gates's group. I mean, Gates was. I mean, you can almost argue that he was a kind of singles act within the group. I mean, he's the face of the group. He's the voice of the group. He writes many of the songs. And he's, like you're suggesting, even like, you know, other guys aren't even on the record sometimes.
Well, touring later in their career, they toured as David Gates and Bread.
Well, yeah,
You know, so there was no question. And of course, I think that's one of the things that led to breakup in 1973. Is that
sure.
Jimmy Griffin was feeling unappreciated, and I think rightly so.
Yeah.
Larry Knechtel, the pianist, came in on their 4th album, so he wasn't part of this or part of any of their early success, but an extremely talented person. And what they could have done with that lineup, they could have gone anywhere. It just seems like I think it's a waste. I think they had a lot of talent they could have done a lot more with.
Well, yeah, and so they did have, you know, it's amazing. I mean, given the tensions probably within the band, how much they did accomplish. But we have Dave, I almost did it. We have Bread. We have Bread at #2 with Make It With You. At #3, well, little Stevie Wonder is growing up, and this Stevie Wonder in 1970 is charting at #3 with Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. And this is really a transition moment for Wonder, I would submit. That Wonder was a kind of child prodigy and recorded on the Tamla label. This is the Motown subsidiary. In fact, Tamla was the first label that Berry Gordy founded. And Little Stevie Wonder was, you know, a phenomenon, you know, Fingertips Part 1 and Part 2. And this, you know, and he has a number of hits in the 60s. In the 70s, of course, Wonder matures into this really interesting artist with a huge number of singles, huge number of hits, of course, but also with really interesting albums. And he becomes I would submit to you, it becomes a kind of cultural force in the 70s. He's a really, he's a really powerful, powerful presence in the music industry. And Signed, Sealed, and Delivered is a kind of transition moment for Wonder in this regard. It peaks at 3. It does, in fact, make #1 on the R&B charts, but it is, I think, this is the moment where Stevie Wonder becomes, Stevie Wonder, and it's really not very long after that that he becomes this powerful presence. I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, Wonder has 10 #1 hits in his career. Most of them that are in the early 70s. I mean, he's extraordinary talent. Just real quickly, Wonder, I think people know Wonder as a keyboardist, but and also the harmonica, but his initial instrument, and some people think his best instrument, were the drums. And so he is this kind of multi-instrumental, just almost force of nature. It's really,
I did not know that.
Yeah, really interesting figure.
Did he write this, or did he start writing later?
Yeah, he did write this. He had help as well. Lula Hardway, Lee Garrett, Sarita Wright also helped write it. And Sarita Wright later became, they were married. One other thing about this song is that the intro to it is there's an electric sitar. And we've talked about the sitar before, but God dang it, almost every song in this era has, there's a little break, an instrumental break with a sitar or something, and this song is no different. I have to confess, though, that my introduction to this song comes from an album that was released a few years later, Peter Frampton album called I'm in You, and he covers Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. And for me,
just a question about sitar. Do you think sitar would have ever had that kind of musical influence if not for George Harrison?
No, I think no. I think Harrison's connection to the instrument was so powerful. I mean, it made the sitar.
It's kind of my feeling too. I don't think we would have heard nearly as much sitar if Harrison had not introduced it in the Beatles.
I have to agree, and so the sitar is, the sitar is everywhere in this era. But so you have Wonder here at #3 with Signed, Sealed, Delivered, I'm Yours. And again, moving into the 70s, Stevie Wonder becomes really a dominant force in popular music. Well, at #4, it's kind of an interesting record.
Oh man, just and incredibly powerful. Of course, it's because of its power. This is War by Edwin Starr, kind of a Motown stable singer who stepped up to re-record this. It had originally been recorded by the Temptations for their album Psychedelic Shack, but it was considered a bit too controversial for their image. They didn't want to hurt their image by turning people off. So Starr stepped up, volunteered to do it, and just blew it out of the water. I think he just did a fantastic job with this. Was nominated for a Grammy in 1971, did not win that, but was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1999. This was written by Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong, Norman Whitfield being the producer of the Temptations and a number of other Motown acts. But he was more into the psychedelic element, more into the protests part. So when he took over from Smokey Robinson as their producer, he took the Temptations in a different direction. But this particular song of his scored a hit with a different Motown artist, Edwin Starr.
Yeah.
It hit #1 in late August and actually replaced Make It With You at the #1 slot. And it wasn't until September when it was bumped by Ain't No Mountain High Enough.
Wow, there we go.
Diana Ross.
Wow, the wild swings of the pop charts.
Overall, the #5 song of 1970.
I have to confess, I think it's a powerful song. It's very much a song of the times. It's also, I think, a song that has kind of faded from consciousness, faded from view a little bit. There are some songs from this era that are, you know, they're omnipresent, but this song, I don't know.
I don't know if you
No, I think
start singing in any particular group, war, good God, Joe. Well, anybody in our generation will immediately respond to that. And I think it's something that has lived beyond. I think the younger generation has picked up on it too. Last time I saw it referenced, there was an allusion to it in Boston Legal. So just like 10 years ago, they had Edwin Starr singing that in court.
Oh, okay.
For what it's worth.
Okay, well, I do. It's my sense that there are songs from this era, even protest songs from this era, that are part of the collective consciousness. And I don't know that this one is necessarily it, but we probably.
I bet both of your sons know it.
I bet neither of them do.
All right. Well, let's check that out.
Yeah, we can check it out. I think I would be really surprised if they either of them did. But
okay.
So we have Edwin Starr's War. At number 5 is a song from the summer of 1970. Very much a kind of summertime hit. It's a weird song. Mungo Jerry's In the Summertime. Mungo Jerry is a name for a British group. It actually comes from a T.S. Eliot poem. Mungo Jerry, basically a kind of one-hit wonder in the United States. Really, In the Summertime was kind of it. While Mungo Jerry was a group, it was fronted by Ray Dorset, and Dorset was the face of the group, the singer, the guitarist, all that. And so for I think many people, Mungo Jerry was Ray Dorset. Ray Dorset was Mungo Jerry. I would just say about this song, though, that there is a, kind of relaxed, kind of summertime feel, almost like a jug band kind of sensibility to it. There's actually a guy playing the jug in the song. But I was surprised to learn that this is one of the biggest selling singles in history. That had upwards of 30 million songs, copies of the song have been sold. And it is a song that is anthologized and put in compilations. It's everywhere. And so I don't have much more to say about it. It's not particularly a socially relevant song. And again, Mungo Jerry, again, the ultimate kind of one-hit wonder. But man, there were a lot of copies of this. And so we've got, at number 5, we've got Mungo Jerry's In the Summertime. Dave, you've got another interesting song.
Yeah, this is number 6. It's a James Brown song. Get Up. I Feel Like Being Like a Sex Machine is the entire title. It was released in July 1970 as a 2-part single, part 1 on side A, part 2 on side B. It hit number 2 on the R&B chart and ranked 326 on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. It would not be in my personal 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. I'll say that right now. Don't have a particularly great appreciation for this song. Although I will say it's fun to watch him perform it. It's
oh, absolutely
amazing.
Yeah, an incredible performer.
Yeah.
Maybe the performer.
This was his first hit with his new band, the JBs. And unlike his earlier hits, horns played more of a minor role, and the musical emphasis was on an insistent riff bass and guitar by the brothers Bootsy and Catfish Collins, along with a kind of call and response interplay between Brown and Bobby Byrd, who was one of the co-writers of the song. Get up, get on up, get up, get on up. So the original single version was recorded in just 2 takes. Apparently that was really common for James Brown. Just the energy.
It has a live feel to it.
Get it down, yeah. And the song begins with a spoken dialogue between Brown and his band. And that's that's kind of fun too, because he just talks about, well, he just feels like getting loose and having fun, and you guys want to do this? Should I count it out?
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, and then they go. So it's interesting.
The Brown in the '60s, in the early '70s is he's a dynamo. He's a really, I think, a cultural force. I think many saw him almost as a potential kind of political figure. I think that Brown was confounding in that he oftentimes allied himself with politicians, that weren't progressive, white Southern politicians, and so I think people had an image of Brown as this, this obviously this talented, dynamo, but also somebody who would be able to speak to civil rights and all of this. And I think the messages were sometimes mixed from Brown in that regard. I think probably it's unfair to consider somebody who is an entertainer to also be a sort of political force. And I don't think that label, I don't think that mantle never really fit comfortably on Brown's shoulders. But it's important to note that this is the era of Black empowerment. This is the era of Black power. No figure in entertainment, no African-American figure in entertainment is more bold, audacious than James Brown. I mean, just Sex Machine. I mean, really. He was out in front. But he was a kind of confounding figure to a number of people who maybe wanted him to do more in terms of civil rights. And he's an amazingly important recording artist.
Artist, working man in show business.
Indeed. Okay, so we have James Brown's Sex Machine. Get Up, I Feel Like Being a Sex Machine, Part 1. Fairly lengthy title. I just wanted to say something about a group at number 9, group called Alive and Kicking, and this is the song Tighter and Tighter. Very much a song of the time. It's a danceable number, kind of forgettable number. I mean, it's 2.5 minutes of propulsive pop music. It's
fun to listen to.
It's fun to listen to. Oh, it's fun to listen to. And it was written by Tommy James of Tommy James and the Shondells, who was a kind of he was a performer, he was a writer, he was kind of a pop impresario, had his own label, the Roulette label.
Love Tommy James.
Tommy James, yeah.
Yeah.
Tommy James, both with the Shondells and in solo. He had a lot of hits. He wrote famously, right? He writes this song, "Crystal Blue Persuasion," which he was going to, in fact, give to the Alive and Kicking, this group out of New York. Decided to kind of keep that for himself, and then he instead penned "Tighter and Tighter." So this is it. This is the high watermark for Alive and Kicking. They would disappear after that. But I think the important part of all this is Tommy James, who behind the scenes and also on front of the stage, he's an interesting force. I mean, it was people knew who he was. People listened to his music.
Kind of a new age, hippy dippy, flower child sentimentality.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and but I think he wore it well. Had some great hits. In fact, one of my first 45s that I just wore out was what was the name of it?
Dragging the Line.
Dragging the Line. Thank you.
The Line from the early '70s. Yeah. Without Chuck Bells. Yeah. He's a kind of brand name, and in a way, Tommy James was a kind of almost brill building figure, and he was a pretty prolific songwriter, and but he did have that kind of hippie dippy sensibility. He wasn't super cool, but he wasn't super square. I mean, we talked about plenty of square people already today. I mean, the Carpenters, nobody was squarer than the Carpenters.
Right.
James was someplace in the middle. So let me just recap then the top 10 from August 15th, August 15th, 1970. At number 1, Close to You. Number 2, Make It With You from Bread. Signed, Sealed, Delivered at 3. Spill the Wine by Eric Burdon and War. In the summertime, Mungo Jerry's only hit. Number 6, War, Edwin Starr. Band of Gold at number 7, Freda, Payne. At number 8, Three Dog Night's Mama Told Me Not to Come. At number 9, Alive and Kicking's Tighter and Tighter. And then a song that we've talked about before, at number 10, Temptations, Ball of Confusion. David,
you know what? We skipped Spill the Wine.
Yeah, so let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about Spill the Wine and the pairing, and the curious pairing of Eric Burdon and War.
I'm not sure that that's so curious. For me,
Really? Okay.
It seems like kind of a natural place for Burdon to go.
All right.
War was, I believe, a San Francisco band.
That sounds right to me. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Burdon loved San Francisco. We know the San Francisco Nights hit that he had with the Animals. But War had their first chart hit with Burdon. This song, yeah. In fact, this song was the only hit for that collaboration, and I think it's brilliant. I just think it's a wonderful, laid back funk type thing. Most of it is just spoken narration.
Yes, yeah.
Burdon talking about a lazy afternoon where he lays down in a field of high Mexican grass.
Indeed.
And has a dream, about being in a Hollywood movie and being taken to the top of a mountain and being in front of women of all sorts. And one of them whispers in his ear a cryptic message. And that's the first time the singing starts.
Right.
Spill the wine, take that pearl. I've always understood it to be dig that girl. But that's not it.
Well, dig that girl actually somehow works better. But yeah, but that's not it. Okay.
No, it's I guess the impetus for this was that the keyboardist, Lonnie Jordan, spilled some wine on the mixing board.
Oh, that's really, okay, of course, there we go.
So, but, all that gives you is the title, Spill the Wine. And then from there, it just really had to get into some fantasy. Rolling Stone ranked Eric Burdon 57th in the 100 greatest singers of all time.
That's plenty high.
They ranked Joe Cocker 97th, I believe.
That's plenty low.
Yeah, but I think there's some justification for that. I think Eric Burdon was a real a great singer, and I think he shows some of his diversity right here with this song. Fantastic. War went on to have some other hits with like Low Rider or Why Can't We Be Friends, but this was the first hit that they had and the only one with Eric Burdon. Peaked at number 3.
Yeah. So again, an interesting pairing and a kind of curious song. And like you said, that with the spoken narration and the flute in the background and all that, it's quite distinctive. Of the songs in the mid-August 1970, this song kind of stands out. There's something about this that's clearly unique. So we've got Eric Burdon in War with Spill the Wine. I'm going to cherry pick from a couple other things that are hitting the charts at this time. And I want to just talk briefly about a band that was not a singles band in the United States, but was one of the most famous bands of this era. And I think retains a certain, there's a certain kind of, notoriety when it comes to, it's The Who, right? It's The Who with Summertime Blues, which is at 27 on the charts here in mid-August. This is as high as Summertime Blues would get for The Who. This is the highest it would reach. Summertime Blues is a cover, a song from Eddie Cochran in the late 1950s. Eddie Cochran was a kind of greaser rocker, proto-rocker of the 50s. He had a few hits, and Cochran had his moment in the sun. This song was this song was a favorite of garage bands all over the world. The song about kind of being picked on and being bored, and and all this kind. There's a kind of attitude.
Oh yeah,
There's a kind of
lazy
attitude in the song.
teenage ennui. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I mean, I guess I see why bands played it. I mean, I think it's fun to play. I'm sure it's fun to play. It's kind of fun to listen to. But as a single, I've always it's weird. The Who is not a singles band. I mean, the Who again that's not a singles band. And not
I don't agree with that. I think they have some fantastic singles. Their early career was little else.
Well,
but it's interesting that the B-side to this one is Heaven and Hell, because if a single like Squeezebox is heaven, then Summertime Blues is hell.
All right. Yeah. I don't much care for it either, but it gives us a chance to talk about the Who, and to your point that you think that the Who, incredible, singles band. How many Who singles in the United States reached the top 10? Just a number.
Top 10.
Top 10 in the United States.
4.
1. Yeah. So 1, and it's I can see for miles, right? Which
I can see for miles, or I can't explain. I figured it was one of those.
Yeah, but okay. But well, the Who had 14 top 10 singles in the UK. 14. They had only one in the US, and most of their singles stalled out in the 20s. They just didn't really climb.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of top 40 hits, and some groups would kill for a top 40 hit. The Who was popular here. They had a following, probably not a great following until Woodstock. I think the summer of '68.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Monterey, Woodstock was incredibly important for the Who's American audience.
Yeah, the appearance on the Smothers Brothers show as well. But right, I agree with you that they got a lot of exposure from those concerts and that TV show. And
Tommy was huge.
So I mean, the Who. I mean, you can argue that the Who sort of invent the concept album. I guess the Beatles had Sgt. Pepper, but maybe perfected is overstated. But the Who spent a lot of time, Pete Townsend in particular, thinking about songs and sequence and story. So this is the classic period for the Who, right? So it's 69 is Tommy, 1970 is Live.
Maybe the first rock opera, I think.
Yeah.
That would be fair to say.
Yeah, it's fair to say, with only maybe 1 or 2 songs worth listening to. But nothing's more overrated than Tommy. But anyway, so you have Tommy in '69, Live at Leeds for 1970. And this is where Summertime Blues is drawn from. The Live at Leeds is considered by many people the greatest live rock album of all time. It has a lot of songs from Tommy on it, but some other tunes as well. And so. And also then in '71, Who's Next, which really I think cements the Who's reputation as as really one of the quintessential rock bands. I mean, this is their moment, and I just find it so odd that of all of this, boiling, Summertime Blues comes out. It just seems to me a very strange, almost unfortunate release as a single. And
yeah, it's a strange choice. It really is.
It's a peculiar deal, but we got the Who, and this will be one of the great bands of all time, and we're really sort of seeing the Who hit their stride. So I definitely wanted to talk a little bit about the Who and Who's Summertime Blues. Dave, you've got a couple of songs here that you want to talk about here at the end that are starting to catch some traction here.
Right. Well, one of them is by actually they're both by acts that are at the peak of their popularity or are working their way toward that. And the first one is Guess Who? Maybe one of the most popular bands worldwide at this time.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right.
Incredible international following.
Yeah.
And the song that want to talk about today is Hand Me Down World. That was at, where was that at this
Yeah,
week?
it's 20. It says 29. It's starting. Yeah,
It peaked at number 17.
yeah. So, but I
But this
agree.
week it's 29.
Yeah, 29. It's one of their most well-known songs, and it also speaks to a kind of political, kind of social consciousness that there's something about the Guess Who in this era that there's something that surrounds them that is, yeah, there's a kind of social thing happening there.
Oh, absolutely. This comes from the album Shared Land.
Yeah, here we go.
The title cut, Shared Land, is just a hippie utopia.
Absolutely.
There's nothing else you can say about that. It's just the absolute expression of what things will be like if we get our way. And the world is in that same sentiment. It was written by Kurt Winter, who took over as a guitarist from Randy Bachman. Share the Land was recorded essentially right after Bachman left the group. Hand Me Down World was written by Kurt Winter. It was produced by Jack Richardson, who had been producing all the Guess Who stuff. Released in October of 1970, it peaked at number 14. I'm talking about the album now, Share the Land.
Yeah.
14 in the Billboard 200. And it was their biggest selling original album. So it had a number of their hits. I think Bus Rider was on it. Several of the things that is actually on their best hits compilation. There are 4 or 5 songs from this album right on that. So, and it was, I think the album cover showed them with a Cherokee, an 80-year-old Cherokee chief.
Yeah.
So the idea was, yeah, let's share land. Let's kind of get that Indian mentality going back, and so.
Yeah, which led to some criticism because the critics of the Guess Who said that they were, they're essentially posers. They were, exploiting themes. They were exploiting Native peoples. I mean, that this was a kind of blatant attempt to sort of cash in on the moment. I think it probably depends on where you're at with the Guess Who to how authentic you think all of this is. But I think there's no getting around the fact that few groups had as much popularity as the Guess Who also then carried forth those themes that were in the larger culture. Those, if you will, hippie themes. I mean, they sold a lot of records.
Well, absolutely, and they were kind of riding the crest of the wave, which was starting to crash.
I think that's right. Yeah,
was coming to an end, but they were still able to cash in on that. I don't see them as being quite that cynical. I think Cummings was a true believer. I think Kurt Winter was too. So I think they were expressing something that they felt was important. I don't think it was merely a mercantile sort of calculation on their part. But that's just how I perceive it,
Yeah, right. And I generally hold that opinion as well. But as you know, the Guess Who, I mean, they have really sharp critics, and had sharp critics even in the day who saw them as as pretenders. Well, and
but they also have huge fans and defenders who are.
Fair point. Yeah, that's right.
I am shocked and appalled that they are not in the Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think they absolutely deserve to be. They were one of the groups that defined the early '70s, and
I don't disagree. Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think. Yeah, they're hurt by the fact that they're Canadian. I think in that regard. But
by the way, as was Anne.
Is it Anne Murray?
Yes, Anne Murray.
Wait a minute.
She wasn't Canadian, she would have been. There would have been no ceiling to her rocket.
Oh, so if Anne Murray had been recording in Nashville and been what? I don't really, Anne Murray. I never had.
Well, if we're talking about Canadian acts, I think you're Anne Murray, Neil Young, Rush, and then Gordon Lightfoot. In that order.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's it. Well, that leads. Well, okay. Canadian acts had an enormous impact in the United States. Always have, but particularly during this era. And I don't know that people necessarily recognize them as Canadian acts. But I mean, you mentioned Gordon Lightfoot. I mean, he's recording and selling a lot of records in the 70s, as is Anne Murray, as are the Guess Who. Yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. I know that you have one more.
I do.
One more person that you want to talk about, who no one is a bigger fan of this particular recording artist than you. That maybe himself.
He has very, very many loyal fans.
That he does.
I am. So we're talking about Neil Diamond, and Neil Diamond is on the chart with Solitary Man this week. Where did he chart with this?
Well, it is at 34 this
34.
Week. Yeah.
I think he rose a few, but he didn't break the top 20 with it. That's the point. It was actually the second recording, the second release of that.
Yes, right.
It was his debut single with Bang Records in 1966, and had a moderate success there, peaking at number 55 on the Hot 100. But in the late 60s and early 70s, Diamond was hot, and he was charting all the time. And so Bang Records thought they would just cash in on his newfound popularity, and they released it again. And it paid off for them, because they sold a lot of singles. Now a lot of people consider Solitary Man to be kind of his signature.
I think that's absolutely right.
Because Neil Diamond, this is just, I haven't read any Neil Diamond biographies or anything, but just based on the songs that he has written, he seems like a kind of strange guy, kind of a loner, someone who prefers wine bottles and imaginary friends and inanimate objects as companions, as opposed to real human beings. Someone who likes to watch from the outside. You think of a song about beautiful noise. He's up in his room listening to all the stuff going on outside, all the life out there.
The soundscape of the city.
Yeah, you think about...
quite inventive. That song is quite inventive, I think.
Yes, it's quite nice. Cracklin' Rosie, it's about a bottle of wine, as opposed to being about a woman, which many people thought it was.
And conversely, then Red Wine is about, in fact, a woman, when many people think it's about a bottle of wine.
That he's trying to get. Yeah, that he's trying to get. Wait. Red Wine is about a woman. Oh, you're just all right. Think about I Am, I Said.
Yeah.
I said to no one there. And not even the chair answered me.
Not even the chair. I don't disagree with you that that peculiar kind of cat, the Solitary Man. Yeah. Yes.
But it's been covered by everybody. It's just incredibly popular. And so, of course, any Diamond compilation, always did it in concert, et cetera, et cetera.
So we've got Neil Diamond at 34 with Solitary Man. Last thing I wanted just to do here, it's mid-August 1970, and I just want to show you, Dave, some covers of magazines. I just want your reaction, okay? And so as we think about this era in American life, it won't be a surprise to, I think, to see these things. But I'm just interested in your reaction to the following. So this is the cover of Time magazine in mid-August 1970. You have a thought here?
Interesting. How to educate your parents. Well, it sounds like a reference to the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song, "Teach Your Parents Well."
It
right?
does, right?
And it definitely looks like it's a referencing homosexuality. Just looking at the picture.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I think it's, yeah, I think, and then the text coming out of the brains, you know, it's all the issues of the day, sexuality war, all this. It's, again, this whole notion of a gender gap, and the idea that that parents need to be kind of brought up to speed on what's happening around the world. You know, it's a heavy time. All right, so let me just ask you this: then, cover of Rolling Stone in mid-August 1970. Is this a surprise?
No.
No. Yeah.
It's not a surprise.
Joplin is, there we go. She is, she's clearly, I think she's a tragic figure, I think, in many ways.
Definitely.
Yeah, just, but, and then
Well,
finally,
just think about all the people who gave their last interview to Rolling Stone.
yeah, no kidding.
I think Jim Morrison was one of them.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
we lost a lot of really talented people right around that time.
Absolutely. And I mean, and not to be ghoulish or anything, she looks really bad in this picture. She doesn't look, that's not the look of a healthy, vivacious young woman.
You rarely see pictures of her looking like a healthy, vivacious woman.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, her decline was evident to all. And then finally, then this is the cover of Time TV Guide, in mid-August. Norman Rockwell painting of Johnny Carson.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, Carson.
Okay. Also not surprising, Carson was an icon.
Was an icon. And was he straddled, right? I mean, he was hip, but he was also a kind of institution. In a way, it sort of made sense that there would be a Rockwell, right? This Rockwell painting.
Yes.
Because this is what you do with items in America that are important. So, yeah, there we go. So what we've covered here are the hits from mid-August 1970, as well as some other kind of cultural features.
Hey, I'll tell you what. I'm going to next month, since you started on this. I'll bring along some Esquire covers from around the time.
Super interesting. Yeah, Esquire was very
but Esquire was doing some fantastic stuff with covers. So, okay.
Very good. So, Dave, you've always have some thoughts for our viewers in terms of subscribing, comments, and those kinds of things. And so I'll let you, you go ahead.
You can subscribe to our channel here and watch any of the shows that we produce, as well as please take a look at the playlist for today. We've got some really great stuff, including Guess Who as a guest by Johnny Cash. Mm-hmm. Fantastic little cut there. And if you want to watch another one of the 50 years ago this month, you can see it right here.
There we go. And let me just put a quick plug in, and just in addition to the viewing list, the playlist, there is also a reading list that accompanies each of these shows, and where you can see then link to articles and to important books about the people that we talk about. So we will see you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
See you next month.